This is Dunna.
Hello.
Dunna is a very successful creator who makes videos about making videos and camera stuff and photography, but Dunna has a problem, so he called me up. Yo, hey man, what's up?
All right, so I've got all of these different photos that I took, and I'm just not really sure where to go with them editing-wise, so I thought instead of me struggling through them on my own, I would challenge you to do the edits for me.
Yeah, sure. What do I get if I win?
What do you mean win? This isn't, it's not a competition.
If I win, you have to buy me coffee for a week.
What? What? Why?
Okay, deal. No take backs. I think we got Dunna right where we want him. So let's go ahead and edit these photos. I'm gonna walk you through how I'm gonna edit them. Let's get it. All right, so the first photo we're gonna work on is this top-down drone shot. And if you own a drone and live anywhere near water, I bet you've tried to get a shot similar to this. So I wanna show you how to take a decent shot like this one and maybe make it look like you're on some tropical paradise or something. So first things first, I'm gonna start with my base swoosh preset. All this does is just adjust the curves of the image, since doing that each time for each photo is kind of tedious. And then next, I'm gonna set a custom white balance by selecting this little eyedropper and then clicking on the white of the water. This will balance out the kind of nice warm sand and make sure that we're not too green in the water. I mean, it's still a little bit green, but we're gonna fix that in just a second. Now let's do some basic exposure adjustments just to balance everything out a little bit, brighten things up, add some contrast, and then we'll increase the vibrance and decrease the saturation. My next step is typically to go all the way down to color calibration, which does really nice global color adjustment. So we're gonna shift the red primaries towards orange and then increase the saturation there. We're gonna move the green primaries. We'll shift those towards green and then decrease the saturation as well. And then for the blue primary, this tends to be where the magic happens. So let's shift our hue towards aqua, and then the saturation will increase by around like 35 or so. I'll add a little vignette, and I always like to adjust the midpoint here. And then let's go up to our HSL. We don't really need to do too much here, given there aren't too many different colors in this image. I'm basically just shifting the warm tones a bit more warm, dropping some saturation slightly on all the hues that we have present in the image, and then we'll do some slight adjustments to our luminance on the reds, orange, blues, and aquas. I'm gonna crop this to 4:5 from Instagram, and then I'm gonna use Command and then the brackets to rotate this into a vertical orientation. Once we're here, I'll do a little bit more custom vignetting and add some radial gradients to kind of increase the exposure in the middle and then darken the edges. Now, given Dunna lives in Victoria in Canada, I'm gonna assume that this is taken somewhere in the Pacific Northwest along the Pacific Ocean. It's nice up there and all, don't get me wrong, but what if we want to make it look like he's on a tropical vacation? Let's go to our masks and create a tropical water, or however you want to call it, mask edit. So for this particular image, since all the water is in one location, I'm just going to use a linear gradient. But for you could use a brush if you wanted to kind of like, move it around in more of a fine-tooth comb. So here's the settings we're going to make for our mask. We're going to increase our exposure by 0.2, decrease our contrast by around -65, increase highlights by 25, shadows increase by 40, whites drop by 10, blacks increase by 15. And then in the color section, we're going to drop the temperature by -50 and then the tint by -25. Now let's also increase the saturation by around like 10 in that one. For effects, we also want to drop the texture by 30, -20 on the clarity, and then +15 on the dehaze. Once you're done making all of these adjustments so that you don't have to go through it all again, if we go up to preset and then select save current settings as preset, then we can save this as like tropical water or something like that. And now we have this beautiful blue water. So let's open this up in Photoshop and do a little bit more cleanup. I'm just gonna go easy on myself and use the spot removal tool to clean up some of the smaller spots, which is good for those smaller spots, but it's not as effective once we get to these larger rocks. So once we start hitting the limit of the capabilities of spot removal tool, let's go swap over to the generative fill option. So we just use the lasso tool, make a selection around the rocks, and then hit generative fill without typing anything in. This might kind of take a couple tries. It did for me. I even layered a gen fill on top of previous gen fills, but eventually it does get the job done and much easier than it would have been any other way. Next up, I want to do a little bit of dodge and burning. So I'll make a luminosity mask using the Lumenzia plugin. This allows me to just kind of affect those white parts of the wave. And then using a white brush, I'll come to a new layer in overlay blend mode and paint over those waves to really make them stand out. And then for a finishing touch, I'm going to use my one-click Orton effect action to give that little dreamy glow. This action is available for free in the description. So now we go from this starting image to this final image. Hopefully Dunna doesn't mind me putting him on a tropical island or something without a Mai Tai. I don't know. We'll see what he thinks. And if you think that this type of editing breakdown is super helpful, then leave a comment to let me know that you want to see more of this in the future. And while you're down there, make sure that you're already subscribed. Okay, so the next image that Dunna sent over was this one. And whenever I'm editing, or heck, even when I'm out shooting especially, I always want to take a step back and think about what I want my viewer to be paying attention to. And then I use my editing tool belt or my photography tool belt, whatever it is, to sort of shape the viewer's attention towards that thing. So in this instance, I want to draw attention to these mountains here, and especially like this middle mountain and the moon. And then we're going to sort of just bust out a whole bunch of stuff in our toolkit to help us get there. So let's get some of this boring stuff out of the way first. I'll start with my lifestyle base curves preset, and then we will increase the contrast. I'll do some like minor adjustments to our exposure, increase the texture a touch, and then I'm going to decrease the clarity because I want to work on enhancing some of that soft light and get some like directional side light there. So by reducing the clarity, that kind of helps soften up that soft light. And then for HSL, we're going to accomplish this by leaning more into the complementary colors of orange and blue, since that's basically like the only colors that we have to work with anyways. So let's shift those warm tones and the greens to the right. I'm going to crank those aquas towards blue as well. Saturation on the all across the board is a little bit over the top, so I'm gonna just bring those down for each of our core colors by like around 50%. And then we'll just make some very slight adjustments to our luminance. Now let's start to shape and draw some light towards our area of attention, those mountains. So we can use a radial gradient, and I use another brush preset that we have here called Warm Glow. This basically adds exposure and warmth and then decreases clarity and dehaze to sort of mimic the effect of soft sunlight. So let's add one of those to the right, and then we'll do a linear gradient on the right side to increase the exposure slightly. And then for the rest of the corners, I'm going to use linear gradients to kind of create a custom vignette, since the viewer's eye is going to be drawn towards what's lighter. So I want to remove their attention from the edges and the darker areas more towards the center. And then that soft light on the right side is also going to help push the viewer's eyes towards the center as well. Now let's go like just crazy in Photoshop. First things first, I want to remove distractions, so I'll use the lasso tool to select the telephone poles and remove them with generative fill. Honestly, I still can't get over how awesome generative fill is. Like, this used to take me so long with clone stamping and stuff. Epic. All right, now a quick reminder that we want people's eyes drawn towards the mountains. We have this nice leading line of the road, but it's a little bit off center. I think it would be a little bit more impactful if that road was a little bit more centered. If it were my photo, I'd maybe step to the right a little bit, but it's Dunna's, so we're gonna mess around with it in post instead. So let's go to Filter, Liquify. We're going to use this forward warp tool to push around some pixels on the road and get them more towards the center. I could try to push this a little bit further, but it does start to break down a little bit. So we're going to try something else in a second. But while we're in this liquify tool, let's just go full ham on it. We can start to also nudge up the mountains with the forward warp tool and add a little bit more scale to them.
But Cal, that's cheating. That's not real photography.
So like, you're right. This is absolutely cheating. But Dunna challenged me to do something cool with these, so we're not pulling any punches. So in the spirit of going for it, let's see if we can continue to center our leading line a little bit more. If we just kind of select this area around the road and then do a generative fill, it's going to do a pretty good job of adding some more road for us. But then if we do it one more time, yeah, I think it does kind of stretch that road a little bit more over towards the center, and it does still go over to the corner, but now it does a better job of taking our viewer's eye from the center of the image towards our subject, those mountains in the background. Now let's just kind of crop things up a little bit to get things lined up on the rule of thirds. I realized that I cropped out the moon here. Just give me a sec. So I'm going to add a glow overlay to the right side as well. I think I got this one from the Atmos bundle. I'm no way affiliated with them, but I can link to that in the description if you want to get those. And then to bring the moon back, I'm going to go into my brushes, and I have this moon brush that I got from Visuals of Julius, I believe. They're awesome. So I'll go ahead and add a fake moon in here, and we'll get a little bit more well-placed, a little bit larger, fuller moon. And like, yes, this is fake, and yes, this is cheating. But this one's only partially cheating because the moon was there. We're just kind of, nudging it over to the side. I know, it's cheating. That's okay. And so to put the little finishing final touches on here, I'm going to do some dodge and burn with the brush tool. Essentially what I'm doing is just kind of brightening up the spots with some color and then darkening up the road and the shadows to kind of add some of that selective contrast rather than just, kind of cranking that contrast slider. We'll add that Orton effect one more time, some sharpening, and then we go from the initial image of this one to this one. Dunna, I'm sorry that I've completely Frankensteined your image, but this was a fun one. There was a lot of stuff to learn here, I think. Okay, this next one is one of my favorite that I got from Dunna. We have this little waterfall with nice, lush, fern-filled scene. I want to draw the viewer's attention to the waterfall. So I'm going to start with my overcast preset, one of my go-tos. Again, presets are linked in the description, of course. This one does tend to run a bit dark, and it's already a dark scene, so I'm going to increase the highlights, the shadows, and then I'm also going to increase the exposure a little bit more. Let's also crop to 4:5 again, since I am a slave to the Instagram overlords. And then on the color, I'm gonna go for kind of like a muted green look rather than a vibrant neon green. This can be super easily accomplished by dropping our green hue more towards yellow. And sometimes you also want to adjust your yellow slider, since sometimes green in your eyes is actually picked up in the yellow channel as well. I also want to desaturate the aqua and the blue, since there's a little bit too much in the sky portion on the top left. And then down in color grading, I want to kind of cool off the shadows and then warm up the highlights. So like pro tip, oftentimes if you're trying to create like a nice warm edit, adding some cool tones to the shadows is a really subtle yet effective way to kind of like balance it out and prevent your image looking like you just like put an orange sepia filter over the top of it. Okay, now let's get started with some of that light shaping that I was talking about. Let's add a radial gradient to the center to increase the exposure a bit there. And then if we right-click that mask and select duplicate and invert, we now get the opposite mask, and then we'll reduce the exposure outside of that selection to create a nice little vignette. This gets us part of the way there with the vignette, but I often also like to add a few linear gradients on the sides to shape the light even further, and you can be a little bit more custom with, more darkness in one corner than the other. And then I won't put one in the top left, since that's where we're gonna wanna enhance that light coming in from the trees like I mentioned earlier. Let's also add one more radial in that lower center to make that water area pop a little bit more. And now let's start enhancing that upper left light. I'm gonna again make a radial gradient and use that warm glow preset that we talked about earlier to mimic that soft sunlight. And then usually I'll do a few of these to kind of build bigger and brighter. So we have the center one, and then it kind of comes out, and then we have another one that comes down towards our waterfall. And for the secret sauce, we're going to press Alt or Option on our keyboard, click on the mask, and then select Intersect Luminance Range. If we drag this little handle on the left to the right, then that will remove the warm glow from the darker spots of the image to make it more realistic. Since, if sun was coming in, it wouldn't be hitting the shadows as much as it would be hitting the brighter area. You can also drag it slightly from the right side as well, so as to not clip the highlights. Now let's do some little more special sauce in Photoshop. I'm gonna do what I call color injection dodge and burn. Essentially what I'm gonna do is use Lumenzia to create a mask that lets me just select the brighter greens on the photo. You can kind of think about this as like coloring inside the lines. And if you don't have Lumenzia, you can just go to Image, Apply Image. It's not gonna be as good, but it will work. Now, once we have that mask selection on a new layer, we change that new layer to Overlay Blend Mode. Now we'll use a brush with a low flow and select the color of green and then adjust that green to be a little bit warmer and a little bit brighter. And then if we go and brush in the foliage and the moss and stuff, you'll notice it starts to brighten it up just a bit to give us that kind of surreal look and really enhance those colors and make them pop. We can also do the same on the waterfall, but this time using a white brush instead. And if we want, we could be done here, but a little extra sauce again, we could also add some light rays. So I have this light ray overlay from Atmos. So we'll set that overlay to screen blend mode, and then we'll add a color balance adjustment layer. And if we click Alt or Option on our keyboard and then kind of hover our little arrow over here and then click, This makes that adjustment layer only affect the layer directly below it, so the light rays in this instance. Now on that color balance adjustment layer, we're gonna go select highlights and then add a little bit of reds, a little bit of yellows, and a touch of magenta. That takes our white rays and makes them warm colored rays, basically. And then we wanna really drop the opacity of that light ray layer, it's a hard one to say, to make sure that it's a little bit more subtle. Less is almost always more when it comes to photo editing. And we go from this starting point to this final image. So I did get one more image from Dunna that he sent over, which was this owl. This was the original image, and then this was my final edit. But rather than walking you through that edit here, Dunna and I actually did a side-by-side comparison of our two different edits over on his channel. So if you want to see how Dunna and I approach editing this same photo side by side, you can pop over to his channel right here, of course, after you subscribe to my channel, and then I'll see you in the next one. Peace.